What if I told you one of the most talented teams in the NFL, loaded with superstars, missed the playoffs because one of their biggest rivals decided to take the day off? That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what happened to the Cincinnati Bengals. Today, we're going to break down the historic failure of their 2024 season, look at the shocking changes and aftermath, and explain why it's feeling an all-out revenge in 2025. Let's get into it.
You know that silence that falls over a team right when their season dies? It's not the quiet of a final whistle. It's that hollow, helpless feeling of sitting in a locker room, watching your playoff dreams disappear on a TV screen hundreds of miles away. That was the scene for the Cincinnati Bengals at the end of the 2024 season. A 9-8 record, a roster loaded with all-pro talent, and a fate decided by a rival who took the day off. For the second straight year, the Bengals finished with a winning record and still found themselves on the outside looking in. But this time felt different. This wasn't just a letdown, it felt like an indictment. It was the kind of failure that doesn't just end a season, it forges the identity of the next one. A failure so deep it has sparked a single-minded obsession in Cincinnati: revenge. Coming into 2024, the Bengals weren't supposed to be scratching and clawing for a playoff spot in Week 18. They were supposed to be fighting for the number one seed. That Super Bowl window, kicked open by Joe Burrow and a young, explosive roster just a few years back, was supposed to be blown wide open. All the pieces were there. You had Joe Burrow, the franchise quarterback with ice in his veins, healthy and playing like an elite QB. Ja'Marr Chase was continuing his all-out assault on the NFL record books, making his case as a top-tier receiver. And on defense, Trey Hendrickson was a one-man wrecking crew, a relentless force who practically lived in opposing backfields and was named a first-team All-Pro for it. They had stars at the most important positions, playing at a level that should have screamed contender. And yet, the final record told a story of frustrating mediocrity: 9 wins, 8 losses, the exact same record as the year before. In the NFL, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. For a team this talented, running in place felt like a catastrophe. The promise of an elite offense and a clutch, playoff-tested roster just dissolved into a cycle of one step forward, one step back. They could hang with anyone on any given Sunday, but they could also lose games that made you scratch your head. The consistency that defines champions was gone, and it left the team, the city, and the front office staring down a terrifying question: how could a roster this good be so painfully average? A 9-8 record isn't about one single flaw, it's the result of 1,000 little paper cuts. It's a slow bleed of missed opportunities and nagging problems that drain a team's championship hopes. For the 2024 Bengals, it was a masterclass in watching potential slip through their fingers. It really started with a defense that had lost its identity. That tough, opportunistic unit that carried them to a Super Bowl had become leaky and unreliable. After losing key veterans in the offseason, the defense was hit hard by injuries, forcing a bunch of young guys in the secondary to learn on the job, and the lessons were painful. They gave up over 24 points in 9 of their first 12 games. You just can't win football games like that, not consistently. The offense, as great as it was, felt like it was constantly trying to climb out of a hole, forced into shootouts that a real championship team should control. That put crushing pressure on Burrow and the offense to be perfect, and nobody's perfect. The offensive line, which always seems to be a worry, would show its cracks at the worst possible moments. A critical turnover, a drive stalling in the red zone. Every single mistake was magnified because the defense couldn't pick them up. It was especially bad inside their own division. The AFC North is a street fight, and the Bengals kept getting pushed around, dropping games to their biggest rivals that came back to haunt them. Every loss was another what if. What if the defense got one more stop? What if the O-line held up for one more second? What if they'd just finished that one drive? The questions piled up week after week, burying a team that was supposed to be flying high. They went into the final weeks not in control, but just clinging to hope, depending on other teams to do them favors. And that's a terrible place for a contender to be. And then, the end. It came in the most infuriating way imaginable. After fighting their way to a 9-8 finish, the Bengals' entire season boiled down to one thing. They needed the Kansas City Chiefs to beat the Denver Broncos. Their playoff lives were in the hands of their biggest rival. So, for one day, the entire city of Cincinnati became Chiefs fans. They had to sit there, completely powerless, and watch their fate get decided 1,000 miles away. But the hope soured fast. The Chiefs had already locked up their playoff spot. They had nothing to play for, so they made the smart, and for Cincinnati, infuriating call. They rested their starters. What happened next was a slow-motion train wreck. The Broncos, playing for their own playoff lives, went all out against what was basically a Kansas City preseason squad. You knew how it was going to end. As the clock hit 0 on a Broncos victory, the door to the AFC playoffs slammed shut right in Cincinnati's face. There was no last-second heave to the end zone for the Bengals, no final defensive stand, just the cold, hard truth on a TV screen. They were out, not because of anything they did that day, but because of a business decision made by another team. It wasn't just disappointment, it was this deep sense of injustice. The story was written. The Chiefs had knocked them out without even trying. That helplessness, that feeling of being robbed of a fair shot, became the bitter, defining moment of their season, and it became the motivation for everything that came next.
After the season ended, the Bengals made one thing crystal clear: 9-8 was not good enough anymore. The days of being happy with a winning record were over. The embarrassing way the season ended demanded change, and that change came fast.
The biggest move? The coaching staff. Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator who was praised as a genius for the game plans that got them to Super Bowl 56, was fired. Just 2 years after being on top of the world, he was out. It was a shocking move to some, but inside the building, it was seen as a necessary one. The defense had fallen too far, too fast. A message had to be sent. Head coach Zach Taylor, who was feeling the pressure himself, made the tough call, ending that chapter of Bengals football for good. To replace Anarumo, the Bengals brought in Al Golden from Notre Dame, a respected defensive mind with a clear mission: fix this defense, plug the leaks, bring back the toughness, and restore the identity they had lost. It was the first real admission that the old way wasn't working anymore, but the changes didn't stop there. The entire offseason was a direct response to the failure of 2024. Every draft pick, every free agent signing was about fixing the weaknesses that had been so brutally exposed. This wasn't a team just tweaking the roster. This was a team performing an autopsy on itself, determined to cut out the disease of mediocrity before it could spread. If firing a Super Bowl coordinator was a sign of a new attitude, the Bengals' next moves were a flat-out declaration of war. The front office knew their championship window is tied directly to their franchise quarterback, and Joe Burrow had been clear about what he wanted. He wanted his guys. The organization listened. In a move that got the whole league's attention, they locked up their superstar receivers for the long haul. First, they signed Jamar Chase to a massive extension. Then they finally ended years of trade rumors and drama by signing T. Higgins to a huge 4-year deal. One of the most dangerous receiving duos in the NFL wasn't going anywhere. It was an aggressive, expensive statement that said, "We are all in on this offense. No more excuses." With his weapons secured, the spotlight now shifts to the single biggest factor in this whole thing: the health of Joe Burrow. For the first time since his rookie year, Burrow is heading into a season without having to spend his entire offseason rehabbing a major injury. No torn ACL, no ruptured appendix, no busted calf. By all accounts, he is the healthiest he has ever been as a pro, free to spend his time perfecting his game instead of just putting his body back together. This is the version of Joe Burrow the rest of the NFL has been afraid of: healthy, paid, and angry. The sting of 2024, the defensive collapses, the close losses, and the absolute powerlessness of that final Sunday hasn't been forgotten. It has been weaponized. Every rep in training camp, every snap of the ball will be fueled by that memory. The 2025 season isn't just another year, it's a mission. It's a revenge tour with clear targets, and for the Cincinnati Bengals, it's time to collect.
Bengals made bold moves this offseason. A new defensive coordinator, a loaded roster, a front office going all in, but will it be enough to conquer the AFC? Drop your 2025 season prediction for the Bengals in the comments. And be sure to like and subscribe. Tune in next week as we continue this Revenge Route series on the teams that did not make the playoffs and looking for revenge in 2025.